What's going on, guys? Welcome to You Suck at Coding. This is a new tutorial series called MERN Miscellaneous, in which I'll be covering various concepts related to the MERN Stack. And in this first video, we'll learn how to perform pagination. So we'll be doing pagination both at a backend and a frontend level. You'll learn how to write a read API that performs pagination at the backend, and also how to integrate that in the front end using obviously React and also MaterialUI's table and table pagination components. So as you can already see, we have a table in which we're able to fetch the data based off of the rows per page. So it only fetches the rows that the user has mentioned at a time, and then we move on to the next page, it fetches the same number of rows again. So I hope you guys are excited for this one, because I am. Let's get started. Alright, so before we get started, I want to talk about the GitHub repository for this project or tutorial series. So let me open that up, make this full screen. So I have this public repository, YT MERN Miscellaneous, and what this does is that it has the starter code for setting up a MERN Stack project. You'll see that the default branch on this is called MERN Setup, which is the starting point of this video. It has a README file that says that it's the repository for this tutorial series on channel You Suck at Coding, and it is the parent branch, which means is that any of the features or tutorials that I add in this series called MERN Miscellaneous would be a separate branch, a new branch, which will be branched off of this parent branch. For example, in this tutorial, I'll be creating a new branch called MERN Pagination that will be a child branch of this, and you'll see all of the code of that over here in the MERN Pagination branch once I'm done. Alright, so let's get started. So we have the project opened up in VS Code, and it has two folders, client and server. The client has the React frontend code, and the server has the Node, Express, and Mongo code. So let me just open up the terminal with Command J. I'm going to do a git status, which will give me the name of the branch we're at. So it's MERN Setup. And yeah, there's nothing to commit. So what I'm going to do now is, first of all, let's clear this. I'm going to start up the project and show you where we're at before I go ahead and create the tutorial. So that's for the client. Let's go inside of the server and do an npm start as well. Right, there's another port at 8080. So I've dealt with that. Let's do npm start again. And here we go. We have servers running on port 8080. Awesome. So you see that it says hello world, which was the starting point of the how to set up a MERN Stack project that I created, the video that I created a while ago. You can check that out on my channel, the link of which would be in the description and also at the top right now. So we'll be building on top of this project. So let's get started. So I'm going to create another terminal, and for this one I'll be creating a new branch. It says git checkout -p, and let's call this MERN Pagination. Awesome. So we have that, and what I'm going to do now is go to the front end client, and I'm going to install MaterialUI. So for that, let's open up MaterialUI's website. Let's type MUI. It works. Right, so we have this. I'm just going to go to get started and see the detailed version of it. Installation, npm, perfect. So I'm going to copy this, paste inside of my client. So while that's happening, we also will be needing, I think we do need an icon, so I'm just going to install the icon part 2. Not just npm. Alright, let's paste this in the client. That should update things. We have a new update. See the source control, it says that there's 2 pending changes. Perfect, so it's working. So what I'm going to do now is create the front end till the point that we have those 2 buttons. The first one that says add users, that's not pertinent to the Pagination API or the Pagination tutorial. So what I'm going to do is build that one and then fast forward the process of doing it so that we can get started exactly at the point where we create the read API and perform the pagination, build the table, and do all of that shebang. So if you guys are interested in knowing how the create API works, I'm basically using a package mini faker that creates the information that I need, or how it's being stored in the MongoDB. You can check out the code on GitHub, the link of which will be in the description. All right. Alright, so we're done with the prerequisites. Before I go ahead and demo that to you, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. First of all, I had not actually installed the MaterialUI icons, and for that, the command is not this one, but it's this one. So you have to go ahead and do that inside of your client folder. And then second of all, we'll also be using BootstrapCSS for this project. If you don't already know how to do that, you can watch my video at the top right that explains how to do that under 1 minute. Alright, so this is our MongoDB Atlas cluster. It shows that we don't have any collections as of now. And this is the UI that I've built. It has this add users, like I've explained before. The read user data button doesn't do anything. We will be doing this in this tutorial. So if I add just one for now and press plus, it says one user created. And if I go over here and refresh, I'll see that the users collection has been added with this one document. There we go. So we have the prerequisites set up, and now we can go ahead and start working with the Pagination API and MaterialUI's table. Right, so we're going to start with creating the read API in the backend. And what I'm going to do is start building it off incrementally. So I'll be creating the API without the pagination, and then I'll show you how to add pagination to it. Let's create a controller. Let's call it read, shall we? Request response, and it's going to be an asynchronous function. Let's do try catch for error handling. I'm going to deal with the error first. So if there is an error, response.status 400.json, and I want to send a field error with the error message saying that error getting data, and I also want to pass the error message. So it will be error.message. That's fine. Alright, so you see that we do have a users collection that we're using to create as well. So without the pagination, how it would work is that we'll do a constant users, and it will be a user collection. So we'll use a user collection with .find, and to this .find method, I'm going to pass an empty object, which means that I want all of the users in the user collection. And let's say I also want this to be sorted based off of the first name and the last name. What I'll do is chain a method .sort, and to this I'm going to pass an object that says first name 1 and then last name also 1. And I'm passing it as 1 because I want them to be in the ascending order of first name as the first query, and then also the last name after the first name. Alright, so that would give us the users, and there's success. Be passing it response.status, and this will be 200.json, and there will be a message. Do we need a message? No, I think we're good. I'm just going to do a users, and that will give us all of the users. So that's how you'll create an API that simply fetches all of the users, or let's say any other data that you want from a particular collection, and then gives it to the front end. But to this, in order to create the pagination, I'm going to create first of all another constant. So I'm going to do a const count. We could also do that with the users.length, but there's a better method of doing it, and this one can be forgot to add await. So add await to it for asynchronous code. So I'm going to do an await user.count documents with an empty object again, and that should give me the count of all of the users. And why we need this is because we want to display with pagination that this is the total number of results, but these are the, this is the range. Let's say 1 to 5 or 50 is what I am rendering or displaying in the front end. So we get the count and we also pass the count. So we have that one thing. Now in order to limit and skip some results, what we'll be doing is outside of a try, I'm going to declare and define two constants. Let's start with const, and that is the page, which is the current page. And this is going to be equivalent to the query page that we passed from the front end. So it will be request.query.page. And I'm going to use a logical OR operator just in case there's some issue that the query is not passed. It doesn't get to the server. By default, it should be 1. So if there is no query, it will be 1. So the current page is going to be page 1. And similarly, I also want the per page, which can also be called as an offset. And for that, I'm gonna create a per page because it aligns more with what we're building in the front end for the table. So it'll be request.query.per page. And if it's not given, similarly, I'm gonna do, let's say 5. So 5 is going to be the default anyways. So we have the page and the per page, and how that comes into the picture is right here in the users. So I'll do a .skip method. I'm going to change this after the sort because we want the first name and last name based sorting for all of the results and not just, let's say, the skipped ones. So we sort all of them, and after that I want to skip page -1 into, I'm going to use parse int because the query is a string, parse int per page. So we skip these many results, and then we want to limit the results that we have based off of the per page query. So it will be again parse int, and this is going to be per page. All right, so let me explain this, by breaking this down. All right, so let's say that as an example, we have all of these users in our database. So in the database, we have this list of users on the left, which are unsorted. So what our query is doing is sorting them out, which is the list on the right from 1 to 10 based off of the first name and the last name. Now let's say as a first query, the first read operation, the query params are page is equal to 1 and per page is equal to 5. So how the formula is working is that we skip the current page, page -1 into 5. This is going to be 0 into 5, which in turn evaluates to be 0. So we skip nothing. Now the next method that is changed is called limit. So we limit these results based off of the rows per page, which is equivalent to 5. That means that out of the sorted list, what we're doing is getting the first 5 results. So index 1 to index 5, and this is going to be the response for the first read. Now let's say for the second iteration, when the API is hit the second time for page 2, so page is equal to 2 and per page again in this case is going to be 5. So now how skip evaluates is that it's going to be page -1, which is 2 -1 into 5, which evaluates to 5. So this means that we have to skip the first 5 results and then we limit it to 5. So what we do is we skip the index 1 to 5 for this read API, and we return as a response index 6 to index 10, which essentially is the page 2. All right, so now that we have that in place, that is all for our API. It was as simple as that. What I'm going to do now is go to routes and just simply import this from the controllers file and then add another API, which is going to be a router.get with the same endpoint, which is users, and read as the controller. Perfect. So we have that, and that is the backend side of things. Now moving on to the front end, I'm gonna start by going into this API folder in the user.js file and create function that basically hits the API endpoint for a read. So it'll be pretty similar. So what I'm going to do is copy this and paste this below. Make changes, change this to read. There's going to be 2 arguments. I'm going to add it as keywords, which is going to be page and per page. That's fine. It's going to be the same endpoint. I'm getting this from .env file if you're wondering what the hell this is. Let's change this to get. It's not going to have a body. It's fine. And with regards to this queries, I'm going to add this page and per page is equal to per page. Yeah, that was easy. So now let's move on to the app.jsx file. We will be accessing this API and rendering the data. And for that, what I'm going to do first is, without any of the UI, simply create the necessary states for it. So I'm going to do users. Let's call it read users. And for this, do const users set users equal to use state, and the initial value is going to be an empty array. And we also want a state for count, so let's call it count, set count, use state. It's going to be 0. All right. Let's add for pagination. I'm gonna need page, set page, use state. I need this to be 0 for MaterialUI. That's fine, we'll be dealing with that. And then there's rows per page. You can also call it per page, but the prop in MaterialUI's pagination component says rows per page, so I'm just going to go with that. Set rows per page, and this one is going to be a default of 5. All right, so we have that. So I'm going to add a use effect hook that fetches the users as soon as the component loads. So let's do a use effect. Let's see if I can get this right without any kinds of autocomplete. Okay, so this is going to call a function called fetch users, which we're going to create right above this one. Const fetch users. It's going to be an asynchronous one. So to fetch users, let's do a try catch. We're using a snack bar in order to display any errors if there are. So it's set snack bar open. We open this up and then we set the message. Snack bar message is going to be the error dot message. All right, so now let's go with the try part. Do a const users. I'm just going to destructure the response that we're getting, the JSON of the response. So users, count, and error if there is any. Let's do it. Await read, to which I'm going to pass in page. So I'm going to do a page plus 1, and that's because we've used 0 as the initial point, as the initial value because of MaterialUI. So we'll always be passing a page plus 1, and the per page is equal to rows per page. That's fine, we have that. So if there's an error, what we want is to open up the snack bar again. So set snack bar open is going to be true, and set snack bar message is going to be the error. All right, and we want this to return so that the rest of the function doesn't work. Okay, so if it is a success, we'll do set users. So it will be set users is equal to the users that we're getting, and also we set the count, which is equivalent to the count. All right, for the purposes of this tutorial, I am going to set the snack bar based off of how many users we're getting, just to show that these are the number of users that we're getting at all times. So let's do a set snack bar, and this is going to be again set snack bar open true, and the set snack bar message is going to be as, let's see, whatever is the count that we get. So it's count, not actually the count. The count is going to be the total count. So we want the users dot length. So whatever is the length of the users fetched. So it's say like 5 users fetched, or 10 users fetched, or 1 user fetched. So that's the idea, if you're wondering. So that's how the fetch users would work. And now we can, I'm gonna create a handler for the button that we have. So it's going to be called handle read users, again asynchronous with an event. So let's do the e prevent default, and it's going to call the function again that we've just created, fetch users. All right, it should be const, my bad. So this handler is what will pass to the button over here with an on click event. So on click we do a handle read users. That should be fine. Okay, so we have that. What are the error relative imports outside of source? So we're importing read the wrong way. I am going to import read. Forgot to do that, and I think VS Code automatically imported it from servers, which was wrong. So it should render the data by default, and I think it's doing that, but we're not displaying it anywhere. So let's fix that. It should be outside of here. So I am going to do a json.stringify and display the data. Sorry, it's the users. All right. So let's see if this works. Okay, so I've named this as request.query. So it'll be query, and that should fix this. Alright, so it says 1 user's fetched, and this also does the same, so we're good. So I'm going to add another user, 1 user created. Now we have 2 users. Similarly, let's do 3 more. Do a plus, 3 users created, and then 5 users fetched. Awesome. So that is working. Now what we need to do is create a table, render all of this in a table, and then use the table pagination in order to fetch the data as we want. So to get started with the table and table pagination, I'm going to make some imports from the MaterialUI. Okay, so we have all of these in place. Just for now, I'm going to comment this one out while it doesn't keep rendering. Let's go ahead and create another div over here. So I'm going to get rid of this, create a div with a class name of margin.5, and inside of here, it's the paper component, and we want an elevation of 2 for this one. To a table container, and the table container, I'm going to add some styling. We want the max height to be 440 actually, my bad. Okay, so inside of the table container, I'm going to create a table. So be table, and we want a sticky header. So I'll pass that as prop, sticky header, table head. We'll get started by creating the table head. Inside of that, we need a table row. So I'm going to copy and paste a code snippet that I took from the MaterialUI's website. It's basically in order to create a styled table header, which is going to be the same primary color that we're using for MaterialUI. So I'm going to paste this right above the function. It's called const style tab cell, and for this I also need to import styled. Let me go ahead and add the import for it, and it's this one. We get styled from MUI material styles. Perfect. And this is what I'll be using now, style table cell instead of a table cell for the header. And create style table cell tag. Okay, so we have a style table cell, and inside of this I'm going to do a bold, and we want the index first. Let's see how this, oh, so we have that. Perfect. I'm just going to copy and paste this for 4 more times for all of the other fields. Okay, I didn't necessarily copy it. Okay, so we have that. This, let's do the first name, last name, the email, and the job title. Perfect. So we have all of that, and also the fact that we only want this to be displayed if there is a count. So what I'm going to do is inside of this div, maybe we can take this entire div too. No, just the inside of this div. For paper, I'm going to wrap this in curly braces and based off of the count that we receive. If the count is non-zero, it's truthy, we want this to be displayed. But if, let's say, it's not, what we want is an H4 that says no users to display. And let's add some styling to it. Last name. So let's say I'm not getting any users. This is how it's going to look. No users to display. Alert of primary kind. Add some padding. Let's move the text to the center. Perfect. So this is what will be showed if there are no users. And if once we do get the users, it's going to go away and we'll see the table that I have not yet created. Perfect. So let's go ahead and create the table after the table head. So after the table head, I'm going to add a table body, and this table body is going to render multiple rows of table based off of each user that we get in the array. So I'm going to do curly braces, users, optional chaining, map, and inside of map, what we're going to do is destructure the response. So we have the first name, the last name, the email, and job. So we have that as the first argument, and we also want the index. So that's the second argument of a map function, and we want to render each of these as a row. So let's do a table row inside of this. I think I'm missing something. Yeah, I need another bracket for this one. Okay, that's not it. Okay, maybe there's a need for another bracket over here. Yep, that's about it. So a table row, we'll add a key, and the key should be unique, so that should be an email. I guess that's fine. I'm going to add a hover prop just for some styling so it looks nice and clean. And let's go ahead and start adding table cells. So every row is going to have all of these cells. The first one, let's do an index +1. Press this. Perfect. So we have 1 to 5, and I'm going to copy and paste this 4 more times, and these are going to be replaced by the props that I just destructured. So it's first name, last name, email, and the final one, which is job title. No, it's just job, my bad. Job title is the name of the header. Perfect. So we have that. So top 5, that's awesome. And that is about it for the table. Let me make this full screen. So this is it. We have our table, and that's how it's displayed. Awesome. So let's say if I add 5 more users and read this, it's going to give me just the 5. It's just fetching the 5. That's because by default, if we don't pass it any page or per page, which we're not at the time, it's simply going to display the first page and the top 5 results. That's the backend validation that we've added. Okay, so let's get started with the table pagination. And for that, I'll be defining some handlers. So the first one is going to be to handle the page change. So I'm going to do a handle change page event, a new page. And what this is going to do essentially is just set the page to whatever is the new page. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is going to be handle change rows per page. And this one, what it's going to do is set the rows per page to, let's do a parse int just to be sure, the target value, and also set the page to 0. So if the user is changing the rows per page and they're at, let's say, the 5th page, and they're changing from 5 to, let's say, 25, we want them to come back to the first page. So every time it changes, we reset the page to 0. All right, so we have those. And now to seal the deal, the final step is to add the table pagination component. So let's do that. And we're going to do that inside of the paper so that it's added as a row of itself. Let's do table pagination tag, and this one's going to be a self-closing. So let me get rid of this. Table pagination. Let's get started with the props. So it's a component of type div, needs to be passed a string. Count is going to be the count that we receive. Page is going to be the page that we have as a state. The rows per page is going to be the rows per page. You get the hang of it. And now what we're going to do is give the options. So we want the rows per page options to be, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm gonna do a wide variety of it. So we have that. Let's see how it looks. So you see that we have this. There's some issue with the styling, and I'm going to deal with that using the Bootstrap classes. But let's actually add the functionality to begin with. So the next prop is going to be on page change, and to this I'm going to pass the handle change page. Perfect. Now we have on rows per page change, and to this we're going to pass handle rows per page, handle change rows per page. Perfect. Alright, so in order to fix the styling, I'm going to just do this hacky way. So I'm going to change the label of rows per page. This I'm going to pass a div. Okay, come on, Emmett. Okay, so inside of this div, we'll basically say the same thing. I'm going to do rows per page, but in order to fix the styling, I am going to add a class name with a margin top of let's say 3. Let's see how this looks. Okay, that's sort of uniform, that's fine. And I'm going to do the same for this part, which is the label displayed rows prop. Div is again going to have a class name of margin top 3, not 34, and we're just going to display it as it was. So let me go ahead and uncomment the part. See that in real time. Okay, so we have rows per page 5, 1 to 5 of 10, and then pressing this gives us 5, 6 to 10 of 10. So you see that the number is changing, but we're not fetching the results. We don't get that snack bar message over here. So what we need to do for that is to add the states page and rows per page to the dependency array of the use effect. I press this button, go to next page. It's going to say 5 users fetch, 6 to 10 out of 10. Let's make this full screen. I am going to do, let's say 10. It says 10 users created. I'm going to press this. It says 1 to 5 of 20. Let me just add 1, and we can see the 1 at the very end. That's because we have total of 21. So if I change this to, let's say 50, it's going to display all of the results over here. So that's basically the idea of adding pagination, because let's say if you have 2000 users, you don't want to be fetching all of those at the same time, because that's just going to make your app hang a lot, and it'll be a really expensive operation that you do that every time there's a change. So if I do a rows per page of 25, it's just going to fetch the 25 users based off of my page number. If I want to see the next page, it's going to fetch 25 users more. And similarly, let's say it's 500, it's 1 to 500 of 2021, 500 users fetched, and this is going to fetch another 500 users. So that's how it works. It would be wise to add a backdrop with the loading, but I think that is not necessarily a concept that is related to pagination, so I'm going to skip that, but you get the idea. So that is about it for creating pagination using MERN Stack. How we can actually make this code better is to simply, let's say, let me just arrange the windows. So what we could do is refactor this code so that these two buttons come from, let's say, a component, so that we don't have this div separately. And then we could clean this up by creating a table that takes in all of this, and that's something that we can import inside as well. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to do that, but the code, the final code that you'll see on the GitHub repository is going to have it as that. So if you read that code and you don't understand what's happening because it doesn't match with the video, just don't worry about it. I'm gonna commit this as is, and then in the final commit I'll be making a commit called code refactor, and that's what's going to add the component. So that concludes the first episode of a new MERN Stack Miscellaneous tutorial series. If you enjoyed watching the video and learned something new from it, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also leave a comment down below about what you want to see as the next episode of this tutorial series. That is all from my end. This is Banish at You Suck at Coding. Until next time.